Shalom from Jerusalem. I'm Jonathan Hessen, and this is TV7's Editor's Note. And in today's edition, I'm very glad to have with us Colonel in Reserve Reuven Ben-Shalom, cross-cultural strategist, a longtime TV7 panelist, and a long list of other positions, from being a pilot in the military to various positions in the war. Of course, you had a very important task, the strategic comms with regard to military cooperation, if I may call it that. Mm-hmm. It's good to have you with us, Colonel.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Let's start actually with the task that you did in the military, since it's not easy coordinating with neighboring militaries, particularly at a time when there was a lot of rhetoric regarding the possibility of the Gazan population in the enclave flooding into Egypt. Egypt was very concerned at that and did not hide it. Went beyond what it required, including with deployments, and it raised a lot of rhetoric also here in Israel and questions, particularly amongst those who do not know. Clarify this matter for us.
Well, in general, that military cooperation, or military diplomacy, as we call it, evolved dramatically from in the past being something on the sidelines. You have the main operational efforts, and you do some diplomacy. You have to explain yourselves. You have some friends and partners. It evolved to a point where now it is a key component of what we do. It is perceived by the IDF as a major effort, just like the other efforts that we have.
Deconfliction.
Absolutely. So if you're operating in a very complex battlefield, and you have various players in that battlefield, if you do not deconflict and coordinate, you're in trouble, or actually you can't cooperate. And it's much more than that. It's a deeper understanding that you don't achieve things only by military might. Even the whole war should be perceived in a way as a part where, unfortunately, we have to go to this devastating measure of warfare, and people suffer and people die. But ultimately, you're going to go back to the diplomatic track. The difference now is that this diplomatic track is seen as something embedded. It's part of everything that you do. And in a way, I would argue that counter to the narrative that we so much love, that we will defend ourselves by ourselves, we can't even do it alone. And it's not like small Israel, I'm now letting you in on a secret, we can't do it alone. Even the United States, right, the major power of the world, recently says, no, you don't do things alone. You do things with partnerships, with coalitions. It's a different mindset.
Well, within risk assessments, naturally, you look at the cost of each engagement, of each task, and ultimately, if the cost is too high, you try to recalibrate and to establish risk assessments that would mitigate that cost. And naturally, stronger together is the motto of NATO, but when you do it with partners and allies, you can lower the cost of even sacrificing the sons and daughters in uniform in very complex scenarios.
The interesting thing here also is that this war is perceived in the world sometimes with very shallow narratives, where in fact we have partners and friends and allies in this region, right, that sometimes their rhetoric overtly can be very disturbing, but that's mainly for political reasons. Yet we see eye to eye in many strategic issues. We in Jordan and Egypt all want stability. We all view Hamas as the enemy that it is, as a proxy of Iran, that is a negative force in the Middle East, and we all try to counter it. So there's so many things that we are aligned.
But we're the only ones who state it openly.
That's a complexity that we have to live with. By the way, I'm not sure that we find the right balance. Mostly what we do is we respect that complexity and we enable it to happen under the radar. But we all understand that we in Jordan and Egypt see things eye to eye, and the entire region. Look at the Abraham Accord partners that we have. There's an entire axis in the Middle East. So this is not like it's maybe perceived abroad, like this is an Israeli war with the Palestinians. No, it's much more broader than that. And to promote that, you must do it together because you have a shared border. if you don't share intelligence, you don't know what's going on. And only with a shared pool of intelligence, you can actually act on it, and many other things that some of them are really best kept under the radar.
I think with regard to Egypt, and particularly also even Jordan, there are more members of Hamas with various types of affiliations incarcerated in those two countries than in Israel. And that is something that not many people raise. Of course, they have their concerns when talking about the Muslim Brotherhood in particular, which Hamas is an offshoot thereof. But the last regime in Cairo, Mohammed Morsi, was the vanguard, so to speak, of the Muslim Brotherhood, something that, of course, benefited Hamas enormously. But nonetheless, when we look at counterterrorism, particularly, and that is, of course, it's a high-intensity conflict when we're talking about Gaza, but nonetheless, it's still counterterrorism. The same issue occurs in Egypt, in Jordan, and other places. But how do you collaborate with the militaries that are very wary of the causality of your actions, on the one hand, and want to have their position also respected when it does not necessarily align strategically with the interests here in Jerusalem?
Well, I think maybe the secret is that it does align strategically. That if you really go to the core of their strategy, it perfectly aligns to ours. Now, I'm not talking about maybe technicalities of spillover of refugees. And I can understand the position, by the way, of Egypt here. And as you said correctly, it's not only that they view Hamas as an enemy, as a threat, but there's a deep fear. It's perceived as an existential threat for them, as it is for us. So I think in a way, we all, these partners that we're talking about, see things strategically aligned. And when you see them strategically aligned, you are promoting the same goals. So you're really fighting in a way, shoulder to shoulder, promoting the same goals. By the way, the word for that is collaboration. Sometimes it's hard for us to use that term. We think that collaborative efforts are something you only do with friends like the Americans. No, you have collaborative efforts with regional players too. Remember that even in the points where we were really challenged in this war, like with the direct attack from Iran, with hundreds of projectiles coming in here, this wasn't countered alone by Israel. It was a magnificent demonstration of regional and international cooperation, with assets and intelligence and fighter jets in the sky all working in harmony to defend Israel. Pretty brilliant, in a way jaw-dropping, because that really, this is that Israel, the nation that dwells alone, that's criticized for what it's doing in Gaza, and suddenly everyone is working in harmony. So again, I'm painting maybe a pink picture right now. The complexities are there, and we already mentioned them.
But it's a fair picture to paint, since, France is one of the greatest critics of the state of Israel. Nevertheless, when we're talking about Houthi attacks, the United States thwarted Houthi attacks for the first time on October 19th. Of 2023. The first one to intercept the various incoming projectiles from the Houthis was on the 17th of October 2023, which were the French Navy for that matter. Mm-hmm. So there are collaborative efforts, there are discussions, and the French do understand the challenges at hand, something that always needs to be taken into account. But nonetheless, going back, as I don't want to deviate too far away from there, the first one to come out and openly state about the collaborative efforts, which you referred to just now, was a former Deputy Chief of General Staff, namely Major General in Reserve currently Yair Golan, who turned politician, far to the left, of course, but nonetheless turned politician. And he was the one, who spoke about the collaborative efforts on the intelligence front, both with the Egyptians and the Jordanians. He is also the one who went and discussed with the Russians the deconfliction in Syria when Prime Minister Netanyahu sent him, of course, to Moscow to deliberate those things with his counterparts there. But from what I understood from the contents of that conversation, it wasn't a let's talk and hammer out a certain understanding. It's more of a, I come here, this is what's going to happen. Take it or leave it. It's going to cost you a lot more if you don't take it. Mm-hmm. And just leave. And that is something that is, of course, the language spoken between Israel and Russia. On the other hand, in the Arab sphere, with such a complex cultural deviant, which has a lot more emotions attached to it, beyond the clear strategic understanding of the various complexities at hand, there is a different type of conversation, I assume.
You're absolutely right. And also here, we're touching on issues where most of them should not be discussed really, or not at least at depth. And when you're talking about Russia, you're talking about an international player coming to this regional playground in a way and creating I would say, an operational complexity for us, also strategic, mostly operational because we're very active in Syria. And the way you negotiate, or the way you discuss there is, has its own sensitivities. The word for there is certainly not collaboration, but deconfliction. And I think you're right in the way you portrayed it. I'm here, you're there. The last thing we want to do is hurt each other, right? Absolutely. That creates, problems. Talking about our regional partners, I would say that it starts from respect. We're neighbors. We share a strategic peace together.
Yes, but the British statement of there are no permanent friends and there are no permanent enemies, there are only permanent interests, also comes to play here.
I may be naive. I insist on seeing the Jordanians and the Egyptians as our friends. Now you can say it's a cold peace, etc. And certainly countries have their interests. And another thing is I can't predict what's going to happen in 100 years. We Israelis, by the way, make this mistake of perceiving the present as something forever and ever. Where we say Jerusalem is our capital forever and ever. Well, history unfolded in a way where every couple hundred years something happened, somebody else overthrew us. We can't even be sure, of the stability of our statehood in 500 years. But for now, I certainly look at Jordan and Egypt with respect as our neighbors, to be respected, with their interests respected, and see the alignment of our interests. And look, Iran makes it very easy for us because what they're doing, they're wreaking havoc in the Middle East, destroying countries. Sometimes even when you take Israel out of the picture, take Lebanon, for instance, forget Israel. Look what they did to Lebanon. Look what they're doing. Look, everything they touched, look what happens. So in a way, it's very easy to see it in this way. That the Iranian agenda is not about the Palestinians. Absolutely not, right? Palestinians may be the toughest nut to crack. I hope we can crack it in this discussion. But certainly we can see in alignment with our neighbors, and we all saw the horrors of war. Look at the strategic change that Sadat, which was a great man, right? And look where that led us today, decades of stability. This just hints to the amazing potential that's even more clear now out of the depths of this horrible war. Not only with Jordan and Egypt, with United Arab Emirates, possibly future countries that will join this mechanism. There's a lot of good potential here.
I completely agree. Now let's take it one step further. Today is 540 days since the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates launched their horrendous atrocities upon southern Israel, murdering a little under 1,200, mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping, at the time, 251 people. There were already 3, of course, in Hamas captivity back then, but nonetheless, in this context, 59 people still remain in Hamas captivity, 540 days. Of them, approximately between at least or less than 24 are alive. We don't know exactly how many. And there are speculations, of course, and people speak about it in different levels. But one of the discussions in the negotiations is we want to receive signs of life to all those that you claim to be alive, because we cannot take this terrorist organization for its word. This brings a lot of strain on the domestic issues in the state of Israel, being exploited, by the way, also for political narratives. And I find it disgusting myself, because I think this is something that must remain in the consensus of the Israeli society. And at the same time, because of a radical Islamist collaboration with radical Marxist groups throughout Europe, the United States, and elsewhere, trying to legitimize those activities, claiming that hostages are mere prisoners of war, which is atrocious. to even consider, it brings a lot of strain between the left and the right here in Israel. Give us 2 cents of this very highly sensitive and complex issue from both angles.
Extremely difficult. And, there's some subjects that we Israelis think that we understand. And now the challenge is to explain it in English to others. Here, we ourselves have a very tough time figuring it out ourselves. And this rides on other complexities in the Israeli society. Some of them started right before the war. Some maybe believe the judicial overhaul that we were dealing with and conflicting on. Some believe that and the ramifications of that weakened us and maybe even gave the opportunity to our enemies. But other deep issues that we're dealing with these days, like the ultra-Orthodox community and joining the army, and we are a democracy, a young democracy that's still finding its way. I was born in a democracy that unfortunately went through a civil war to forge where it is today. So I hope we don't have to go on that path, God forbid. But that term, civil war, is being floated in recent weeks. You and I, I'm sure, are terrified just to hear this terminology. But the problem here is, I think, that there's no real discourse. People are clinging to narratives. These narratives are taken to the extreme. Maybe I'm not with you 100% on this issue of exploitation. I don't think that most people use this as an excuse to just hammer the other side politically. Most of the people are maybe captive in these narratives and truly believe passionately that the other side has lost it. The other side is doing crazy things.
I completely agree.
So even to take the most extreme issue now, the hostages, unfortunately, there are many Israelis now that oppose Netanyahu and his government, that believe that Netanyahu doesn't want the hostages back. Of course he wants the hostages back. What are you talking about? Yet the strategy to achieve that is perceived in a different way. And this basic issue of hostages, historically, we have a problem with it.
Yes, but the same people who believe that, and they genuinely believe that, it didn't, emerge in their mind out of thin air. There was a deliberate effort to trickle that down by various actors, and we both know who those actors are, to try and manipulate a certain discourse to further bolster their narrative. This, by the way, is exploited on both sides, and that's why I say this aspect of utilizing matters that must remain in Israeli consensus, because 59 hostages, these are lives that are in captivity. At least or less than 24 of them are alive and waiting to be returned home. I pray to God that they will be returned home. There are no assurances ever when we're dealing with those type of bad actors who seek to destroy. Those are evil people, this Islamist organization. And, it's, again, being utilized outside of the boundaries of the consensus. And the same goes for the military, which I think is also atrocious.
Just explain what you mean by it goes for the military too.
Well, what I mean is that both sides try to utilize the military for their own narratives, which has been more the case before the 7th of October. It dimmed down a little bit because people understood that this is the military of the people, but nonetheless, it was utilized for various narratives.
Well, even though I spent most of the last year and a half in the military just carries out the policy, does it legally, according to international humanitarian law, and by the way, exceeds any other norm in the world, and I have no problem with
Speaking about the discourse, though.
Yeah, so the discourse here, unfortunately, everyone's to blame. I think, by the way, also going to the atrocities of October 7th and the reasoning behind that, first and foremost, you have those who are in power, those that bear responsibility and should also demonstrate accountability. So here I wouldn't only take it to one side, twisting the narratives and exploiting it for political reasons, because I think a lot can be done on both sides. Mainly, the Israeli leadership right now could be doing more in order to lower the flames, use better rhetoric, more leadership.
Which is a sign of true leadership.
And I think that is not enough demonstrated in Israel, almost to the point maybe that it seems like political players enjoy, I'm sorry to use this word, but enjoy politically this clash, this polarization, because this polarization keeps their camps very clear. I'm right. The other side is stupid. The other side is crazy. The other side is treacherous. We even have this harsh terminology, like talking about treason. And this even takes to conspiracy theory and other crazy ideas that have been floated here. Guys, calm down. Take it back to the center. Understand where we are and promote this discourse. As for the hostages, we can make it very clear. One side thinks you don't negotiate with terrorists. You don't give in to their demands, because what does Hamas want? They want us to end the war and to stay in power. In general, this government says not going to happen. You're not staying in power.
Justifiably so.
You are finished, Hamas. Right. You're done.
Right.
You're done. We're going to kill you. By the way, they could release the hostages, get on a ship and leave, and then we won't kill them, okay? But they're done. This is what the government said. The other side, and you cannot blame, by the way, families that have their loved ones in Gaza, when they say, I want them back at all costs. All costs. Stop the war. Promise them you're going to stop the war. Take the IDF forces out. Just bring my son back. Now, in that narrative, I can understand that thought. But the government also has a responsibility. So here we already demonstrated this balance that's very hard to explain.
Well, we don't have very much time left, and I thought it was important to discuss this, and we both agreed on that. But I do want, for 1 minute, just to highlight to our viewers, TV7 Israel is a donation-based ministry, meaning that all of our productions are exclusively reliant on the generosity of yourself and other viewers just like you. And therefore, if you're blessed by the content of our programs and enjoy watching and get, of course, more knowledgeable about the various complexities at hand, as we touch a lot of issues that most others do not touch, go to our website at www.tv7israelnews.com and support us with a donation. We have 4 minutes roughly, and I'd like to touch base on Yemen, which correlates with Iran, of course, since it is an Iranian proxy. But Ansar Allah, which is the name of the umbrella terrorist organization designated as such by the United States, Israel, and others, has launched multiple missiles in the direction of Israel. And, yesterday I went to a cafe for a brief 20 minutes, and I was speaking with the seller there, and he asked me about my 2 boys, and we were talking, and he said, he has a 9-year-old boy. He said, we don't even realize the implications of the rocket alert sirens on the psychological mentality of our children and how it's going to impact them in years to come. It took me a couple of minutes to really think about it, since we also experienced the same, in the Gulf War and other wars where Israel was subject to rocket fire, and we were the younger generations experiencing that, and before that, other circumstances. This needs to end.
Absolutely. Well, this week I had the sirens, a couple of times, once walking in Tel Aviv, once at 4 or 5 in the morning. And then it hit me that in one of the programs a few weeks ago when I spoke to you, I said something and I made a mistake. I downplayed the rockets from Yemen. I don't know if you remember this, but I said something like, we shoot them out of the sky anyway. Perhaps I was being a bit propagandist, saying, who are they with their rockets? No, every siren, when you see children running and ducking for cover in Tel Aviv, even the impact, not only emotional impact, the financial impact, the fact that an entire nation or millions of people every morning at 4 or 5 in the morning have to run to their bomb shelters. By Yemen, look at the map. Look where Yemen is. What do they want from us? Helping the Palestinians? Give me a break.
Well, their motto is...
Give me a break. This is, of course, promoting the entire agenda of the Iranian axis.
Yeah.
And what's amazing, by the way, is to see this country that has its problems, very similar to what you see in Lebanon and in Gaza. People that have problems in life, right? Their lives aren't good. Yet where do they send all their efforts, all their funding? To rockets, to ballistic missiles to shoot at another country? And you're right, this has to end, but not alone. Our international partners, mainly the United States, we have to take out this threat. Remember, the freedom of navigation impacts world economy. It's much more than Israelis going to the bomb shelter at 5 a.m.
Absolutely. Well, in that context, I think, first of all, the motto of Ansar Allah or the Houthis is the same motto as the RGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which says death to America, death to Israel, curse the Jews, victory to Islam. This is their motto. This is what they chant every time they go out. They also chant in Iran specifically, death to England, and they have other baggage that they want to destroy other countries. But it seems like this rhetoric is falling on deaf ears in many of those countries, irrespective of the fact, and I will highlight this just for the sake also of the families. I know a lot of families of service members on various aircraft carriers and other vessels are watching our shows, and they've relayed this to me personally. We need to also be thankful. First and foremost, first and foremost to God, but first and foremost when we're talking about partner nations, the United States of America, through thick and thin, more, less, but, really, thousands upon thousands of American troops. The United Kingdom, instrumental. People don't realize how instrumental they are. From their intelligence communities, which is a big part of operations here in the area, as well as their Air Force. They're part of the joint American-British task force contending with the Houthis as we speak, even though the United States is in the forefront. Staff officers operating, including assistance vessels from the Netherlands, from Spain, from Italy, from Greece, all the way to Germany, intelligence agencies from Australia, which are very instrumental. People don't even realize how instrumental the Australians are, the Canadians, so we're talking here about a global effort despite the toxic environment in the various countries that we're speaking of, because of a lot of foreigners who refuse to integrate and seek to enforce their own cultures upon their host countries. Nonetheless, the host countries themselves, the people themselves, are still staunchly supporting, for the most part, Israel and Western civilization at large, and that is something beautiful that we should also keep in mind. But Colonel Ben-Shalom, this is all the time that we have for today. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Jonathan.
I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition, wishing you already a Shavua Tov, a good week to all of you. And until our next edition, from here in Jerusalem, Shalom.